Here's how Trevor Noah, an immigrant, presumably legal, from South Africa, frames the reparations debate.
So to your question, I think you have to understand what the word reparations means first. So reparations, you are repairing something that you have broken. You are paying for something that you were supposed to pay for. I'm not saying that there aren't people living in America today who are suffering and are going through pain and strife because of what's happening when it comes to machines taking jobs, factories becoming industrialized, etc. But reparations is a specific conversation about a specific time in America, and that is black people were slaves.
Now, the word reparations was not used when this reporter in August of 1963 asked President John F. Kennedy about whether or not he feels blacks deserve special dispensation. Here's the reporter's question.
Mr. President, some Negro leaders are saying that, like the Jews persecuted by the Nazis, the Negro is entitled to some kind of special dispensation for the pain of second-class citizenship over these many decades and generations. What is your view of that in general? And what is your view in particular on the specific point that they are recommending of job quotas by race?
You catch that? Special dispensation, no different from reparations, because of past injustices. And also, what about quotas for jobs? Here's what JFK said.
Well, I don't think that is the generally held view, at least as I understand it, of the Negro community, that there is some compensation due for the lost years, particularly in the field of education. What I think they would like is to see their children well educated so that they could hold jobs and have their children accepted, have themselves accepted as equal members of the community. So I don't think we can undo the past. In fact, the past is going to be with us in a good many years in uneducated men and women who lost their chance for a decent education. But we have to do the best we can now. That's what we're trying to do. I don't think quotas are a good idea. I think it's a mistake to begin to assign quotas on the basis of religion or race, color, nationality.
Now, not only did JFK say it's a mistake to assign quotas based upon race or color or nationality, he went further.
I think we get into a good deal of trouble. Our whole view of ourselves is sort of one society. Now, that hasn't been true, but at least that's where we're trying to go. And I think that we ought to not to begin the quota system. On the other hand, I do think that we ought to make an effort to give a fair chance to everyone who's qualified, not through a quota, but just look over our employment roles, look over our areas where we're hiring people, and at least make sure we're giving everyone a fair chance, but not a hard, fast quotas so much for the... We're too mixed, this society of ours, to begin to divide ourselves on a basis of race or color.
Now, 5 years later, his brother Bobby Kennedy announced his candidacy for the presidency. And here's what Bobby Kennedy said. I run to seek new policies to end the bloodshed in Vietnam and in our cities, policies to close the gaps that now exist between black and white. You see the distinction here? Brother John was about equal rights. We can't undo the past. All a state can be is just in its own time. Bobby is about, quote, closing the gaps. The distinction is between equal rights and equal results. That same year, the leader of an organization called the Urban League, his name is Whitney Young, proposed a 10-year domestic Marshall Plan for blacks. But his board opposed. In rejecting it, the president of the Urban League in Pittsburgh said the public would ask, what in blazes are these guys up to? They tell us for years that we must buy non-discrimination, and then they say, it isn't what we want, end of quote. A member of the Urban League chapter in New York objected to what he called, quote, the heart of it, the business of employing Negroes because they are Negroes, close quote. Again, equal rights versus equal results. Now, I mentioned the contrast between John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy because I'm often asked, when did the civil rights struggle go off the rails? I don't have any specific time, but I think the two statements by the Kennedy brothers are instructive. John was about equal rights. Bobby is about equal results. Recall I testified against reparations before a House subcommittee. Here are some highlights.
I am the executive producer of a documentary that came out June 19 last year called Uncle Tom, An Oral History of the Black Conservative. And as Congresswoman Lee pointed out, Black people are a race of overcomers. And it talks about the fact that despite all the problems that have been brought up in this committee about racism, about slavery, about Jim Crow, Black people have overcome to the point now where only 20% of Black people are below the federally defined level of poverty. Still too high, but in 1940, that number was 87%. And 20 years later, that number had been reduced to 47%, a 40-point drop in 20 years. That is the greatest 20-year period of economic expansion for the history of Black Americans. And notably, they came before the Brown versus Board of Education decision. They came before the Civil Rights Bills of 1964, 1965. Despite all of this racism, all of this prejudice, Black people still overcame. I also find it ironic we're having this hearing 13 years after we elected and then re-elected the first Black president of the United States. I'm old school. I still get the newspapers thrown to my house. And the day that Obama got elected, I got the New York Times and the LA Times thrown to my home. And on the front pages of both those newspapers, there were colored pictures of Black parents hugging their kids, crying, saying things like, now I can say for the first time truly that if you work hard, you can be anything you want to be. In 1997, Time Magazine and CNN did a broad survey of Black teens and white teens and asked both of them whether or not racism was a major problem in America. And both of them said yes, not too surprisingly. But then Black teens were asked the following question: is racism a big problem, a small problem, or no problem in your own daily life? 89% of Black teens in 1997 said racism was a small problem or no problem in my own daily life. In fact, twice as many Black teens as white teens said failure to take advantage of available opportunities is a bigger problem than racism, end of quote. And that again was 23 years ago before Obama got elected, let alone reelected. Speaking of Obama, 2007, he ran for presidency. His rival for the Democratic side was Hillary Clinton. And on the Republican side, the two rivals, primary rivals, were John McCain and Mitt Romney. Gallup asked whether or not Americans would not vote for a Black person, referring to Obama, would not vote for a woman, referring to Hillary Clinton, would not vote for a Mormon, referring to Mitt Romney, would not vote for a person as old as John McCain would be, 72 years old. And what Gallup found is 5% of Americans said they would not, under any circumstances, vote for a Black person.